Among the most well-worn phrases in the business world is the metaphor, thinking outside the box. Think differently, unconventionally, creatively, freely, off the beaten path. Think outside the box. It seems like the readings today on the 26th Sunday of Ordinary Time are demanding that we think outside the box. Today's first reading for the book of Numbers, we hear that Eldad and Medad are not at the ritual ceremony. And Moses says to Joshua, "So what? So what? The Spirit can work outside the box. He doesn't have to be confined to an institution or a ritual or a ceremony or a certain script. Don't allow a monopoly of God's wisdom or charism to be confined." Moses says to the Israelite people, think outside the box. God's way are not humans' ways. God can't be limited to our small-minded, capricious, limited humans' ways of thinking. God acts as God wills, unexpectedly, surprisingly. He works through different ways and different means. Don't confine God. One of Jesus' apostles, John, went to Jesus with a complaint. One of the disciples is driving out demons in your name, and he's not one of us. Jesus says, no big deal. Don't stop him. Don't prevent him. But John is upset. He's not one of us. And then Jesus retorts, whoever is not against us is for us. Think outside the box, Jesus tells John. May I suggest to you that all religions tend to have exclusive control over ways to salvation, every religion I've studied. But God is free to work outside our familiar structures because He's God. That does not mean our structures are irrelevant or unnecessary or unimportant. We should all work with genuine humility to make our religious structures as open as possible to the saving power of God. While the disciples wanted to wall people out, Jesus wanted to welcome people in. While the disciples were narrow-minded and prohibited others, Jesus was broad-minded and promoted and lifted up others. While the disciples tended to be exclusive, Jesus was all-inclusive. While the disciples were weighed down by the reluctance to change, Jesus was free-spirited and open-minded to the graces of new beginnings. While the disciples were fixated on a me-first attitude, Jesus was primarily focused on an altruistic way of life. While the disciples saw scandal as a stumbling block, an obstacle, and hindrance to another person's path, Jesus said, be a stepping stone, not a stumbling block, to another's way to salvation. In the gospel, is Jesus really advocating self-harm, mutilation, and death by drowning? Jesus uses a Semitic exaggeration. We call it a hyperbole, to emphasize that what he is saying is serious. Jesus does not want us to take him literally. It's like akin to someone saying today, I'll give you my right arm to see the World Series. Jesus didn't mean to mutilate or maim or cut off one's prized parts of our human anatomy. But he used the image to show us the seriousness of sin and the seriousness of scandal. Jesus denounces harmful deeds without mincing words. Cut it off. Pluck it out. These bodily parts, if they're used to sin, Jesus does not take sin lightly, nor should we. Sin persists in all human beings after the fall of Adam and Eve. All humans sin. We lie, we pass judgment on others. We lust and hoard wealth. We neglect our neighbors indeed. We harm the earth. In many ways of our actions or failures of actions break our relationship with God and other human beings. Jesus is looking for servants who will recognize their sins, their limitations, yet seek God's love so that we don't offend God or lead other people astray by our lack of witness. Jesus wants us to be servants who turn away from sin and turn to Jesus in repentance, in trust. For the closer we get to Jesus, the humbler we become. I like how Pope Francis always says, we need to think like Christians. We need to feel like Christians. We need to act like Christians. Pope Francis says it all the time. It could be Pope Francis' motto. Think like Christians. Feel like Christians. Act like Christians. All of us, the whole church, should ask the Lord for the grace to be consistent. We must acknowledge that we are sinners. We are weak. We are inconsistent. And at times we are downright unfaithful. We must be ready to ask the Lord for his forgiveness, accept his mercy, and know his love. In Vatican Council II document, Gaudium et Spes, number 37, says, finding ourselves in the midst of the battlefield, we have to struggle to do what is right daily. And it is at a great cost to ourselves. And aided by God's grace, we succeed in achieving our inner integrity. That's the goal of holiness. Inner integrity. That's the height of spiritual maturity. If we would go to great lengths to avoid the loss of any limb, our arm, our leg, or our eyes, I remember my mom say always, these senses are precious and priceless. Guard them. Would we be willing to lose? What about the loss of our immortal soul? The Lord who healed the man with a shriveled hand in the synagogue. The Lord who restored the sight of eyes to the blind man. The Lord who washed his disciples' feet at the Last Supper. The Lord who calls us today to the Eucharistic sharing. We call upon his name. Discipleship is the work of a lifetime. May we recommit to sinning less and loving more this week. Faithfulness to the Lord is always demanding of us a new way of love. We are asked each day to think outside the box, to be a disciple. We can say, well, this is the church I signed up for. It's a new world today, right? Well, how are you going to evangelize the world? By thinking outside the box in new ways. COVID-19 has taught us to think outside the box. Jesus reminded his fretful and fickle disciples that the smallest act of kindness done and rendered in his name brings an eternal reward. The cold cup of water is a symbol of a Christian act of love. Mother Teresa of Calcutta, St. Teresa of Lisieux spoke about small things done with great love, brought great blessings to others. It's not the size of our deeds that matters. It's the generosity of our heart that impels us to share, to care, to dare, for the sake of the gospel. Think outside the box. God can work in wondrous ways on any given day. To a person, a place, an event, a sacrament, and someone outside.